All right. Let's go ahead and get started. I must apologize. My internet just was not holding out today and I couldn't live stream. So, really wanted to kind of bring this live to you because I wanted to try to do something a little bit different. But I'll go ahead and do a recording and upload it to YouTube and share it out later. So, again, I apologize. Unfortunately, I just don't have the best internet, and it sometimes is great and sometimes it's not. So, today is one of those days where it's not all that great. So anyway, it's day 28. Day 28. So we've got today and we've got 3 more days after today. So quickly this month is coming to an end. And I've been focusing this week on going back to doing some drawing. Yesterday and the day before, I did a kind of interactive type of drawing that I call big mouth drawing. And today I wanted to do something a little bit different. It's drawing, but it's kind of thinking about something in a different way and kind of creating a monster from that. So one of the things that I've done in the past with monsters is to create monster names. What I mean is that I draw the letters of a name, like my name or somebody else's name, and I turn the letters into monsters. So I thought about, well, why don't I share that? And so that's what I wanted to share today is how to take letters and thinking about creating, turning them into monsters. So you could just do a single letters, or you could do an entire name. So I want to just kind of walk you through the steps that I, excuse me, that I use when I do just. It's going to be a single letter, but it's very similar to the way I would do an entire name. And but yeah, let's go ahead and we'll dive into it, and I'll share the materials. I'm just going to be using my typical drawing materials, pencil, eraser, and my pens. Not going to be adding color to this, just again because it's just takes more time. So anyway, let me go ahead and switch it over, and we'll go ahead and get started. So the last couple of days I was using some drawing paper. I've switched back to my mixed media paper, so that way if later I decide I want to add some watercolor to it, I can. So this is that 6 by 8 inch, so 6 inches wide, 8 inches tall. I have it turned this way because I'm going to do just a single letter on here, and the letter is going to be taller than it is wide. If I was going to do a name, I would have the paper this way, and depending on the name or the word and how long it was, it might need to be a very long, skinny piece of paper. So if I was going to do my name, ERIC, that would fit on here. But I'm just going to do a single letter. And I've got my pens, my eraser, and my pencil. So I always want to draw in pencil first, just so that I can get it down and figure everything out. And then I can outline it and go from there. So whether I'm doing a single letter or if I'm doing an entire name, I like to have guidelines because I want this to be even. So I could pull out a ruler and I could measure down. And for a name, that's probably what I would do. I would get a ruler and I'd measure. But because I'm just going to do a single letter, I'm going to go ahead and put a guideline, just a real light line up here. And then down here, I'm going to go up about the same amount of, maybe even just a little bit. It's always better if you're going to have more space. Sometimes it's better to have it at the bottom than at the top. So maybe a little bit more space at the bottom. And like I said, if I wanted to make sure this was nice and even, I could use my ruler, measure it, and I could have nice straight lines. So I'm just going to start off with the first letter of the alphabet, letter A. And pretty much my process is the same. So I'm going to draw a big letter A there. And you could really do this anyway. I'm just going to kind of do some simple standard block letters. And I try to use a light sketching motion. That way I can easily erase. If I wanted to, I could have it come to a point at the top. I'm having it flat because it actually will be maybe a little bit better for a monster. And I have to kind of think about like how thick these are going to be. So I can always think about like, oh, it comes up here. So if it's about that thick, that's good. Same thing here. And then my cross piece Okay. So I just draw out a nice big block letter and sketch it out. It doesn't have to be perfect because if it's too straight and too perfect, then it doesn't relate itself to a monster. So I'm going to monsterize this. There's lots of things that I can do, but I wanted to still read as the letter A, and that's the tricky part. So if I have a whole bunch of stuff like big horns that stick out and arms and stuff that come out, it might be very difficult to tell that this is the letter A. So I want to keep that because if I'm doing a name, I want it to be legible. I want people to be able to read what the name is. So one of the things I always think about is like, okay, well, which direction is the monster facing? And some letters, it makes sense that the monster is facing directly out at us. For a letter like a C or an E, a lot of times the monster will be kind of facing more off to the side. And so I kind of look for things that would make natural feet, natural eye, well, not natural eyes, but maybe a natural mouth, maybe, arms, whatever. Well, sometimes a natural mouth. Like the letter C, I think of as like a one big mouth. So, of course, the A has some legs and feet. So that just makes sense that this is going to be the feet. He's going to have some feet. I can have him have some arms, but the arms will be kind of tucked in. Okay, and then a natural mouth. Well, I think this little part of the A is going to be a perfect place to do a mouth. Okay, so I have mouth, feet, some arms on the side, but not sticking out, and then some eyes. So I like to start with eyes, and that just sort of helps set the tone. I don't want to have them sticking out too far. I'm going to make them come out a little bit. Yeah, and then one of the things is it's a monster, so I probably don't want to have like really hard, sharp corners. So I can kind of round off the top of his head. And I can do some of those standard things that I like to do with my monsters. But this is a different challenge. And just to kind of take each shape and think about like, okay, where's the monster in it? Okay, so got a couple eyes. If this is going to be the mouth, how's it going to be? I kind of made this side a little thicker than that side, so I think I'll come up, round that off a little bit, erase that part, and just kind of still keeping that triangular shape, but just trying to curve it a little bit. And of course, maybe I want to have the tongue in there. He's got his mouth open. Is he going to have one tooth? I think he just needs to kind of have like one kind of big buck tooth in there. Okay. So again, like straight lines are a little bit weird for monsters. So I'm going to kind of curve him a little bit, and I'm going to have arms. But maybe they come in. Maybe he's holding something. I haven't quite figured those out yet, but I can kind of sketch them in, And then thinking about his feet and his legs, those are pretty long. So what I might do is actually, here's his leg coming up, and maybe that just gets rounded over a little bit down further, just to kind of. Actually, I think I'm going to do it this way. All right. And then maybe he's got little claws on his toes. Okay, I don't like where these arms are. So I can do all my refining. I can kind of really get it the way I want it to be with the pencil. And it's I am going to put some horns on him, but I just don't want them to be super big to like really change it where it looks like, oh, that's the letter T, not the letter A. I, I just kind of feel like his legs are just way too long. I know it's the letter A, but I just kind of feel like it could be a little bit shorter. Maybe he's got some hair. Okay, so yeah, that's the real challenge, is to kind of make it look like a monster, feel like a monster, but still retain that look of the letter. So I think when you look at that, you can really see that letter A. Sometimes I find that that the thicker the letters are, the easier it is to sort of monsterize them. Because if this was like a real thick, chubby, with real thick, chubby legs and such, just maybe would lend itself to a monster a little bit better than kind of the long, skinny that I had. So that that's the challenge. And oftentimes it's like, oh yeah, I thought of that afterwards. And I haven't done this too often. I haven't done every letter. I've done my name several times, and so it's like it's really interesting to kind of think about the different ways that you can do a letter. The other thing is that it maybe this was a monster that had 4 legs, and no arms. So a totally different kind of way of thinking about it. So this is very, very similar to what I've done. Sketch it out first, and then outline it. But as I'm outlining it, I'm really trying to think of ways to maybe add some details, or fix it up a little bit, change it a little bit. Alright. He just makes me chuckle. I think that's a good sign for me, is that when I look at the monster and I chuckle a little bit. I find that whenever I'm doing the letters, that oftentimes I do have to kind of rethink my standard way of drawing monsters, and you're trying to fit it into the letter shape. So that's a challenge. And so, I end up kind of thinking about different types of monsters. Like I said, four-legged monsters, or monsters that have more kind of animal features. And you could do a name with all uppercase letters. You could do lowercase letters. You're really not limited to what you could do. I've been thinking here it might be interesting to do a monster alphabet and do 26 drawings of the different letters. Definitely won't be doing that today, but it might be something to think about for the future. One thing to kind of think about, it kind of built off of that notion of doing a monster alphabet, is that you could take these drawings and you could scan them. So you could do all of your ink work and then scan them, and then you could print out the scanned image, and you could do multiples, and you can have your own like coloring sheets. So thinking about like if you have kids or grandkids, or even if you just kind of like not sure how you might add color to them. And you might think like, oh, I don't know what color to make them. You can always try out different variations. I mean, so many of us have those all-in-one printers, which are basically scanners put on top of inkjet printers. Now, one thing is if you do print it on your inkjet printer, the ink can bleed. So, if you decide like, oh, I'm going to paint over it with watercolor, might not be the best idea, but, thinking about how you might color it in with colored pencil or marker. Alright, so use that, I forgot this part. Use that thicker pen like I've done just to kind of get the basic outline, and then I can come in with the thinner marker, the thinner pen, and really embellish the lines, make those wonky lines that I like. I find something very soothing and relaxing of just kind of outlining it with the black pen. Especially just, kind of taking my time, not trying to rush it. Yeah, I think, you can really see the letter. And then even whenever, if I'm doing a name, I can also think about the colors that I'm using. If I really want the letter to stand out, I might use very similar colors for the whole monster. So kind of thinking about this monster. If I use very, very different colors, then some of the parts of the monster might not fit in well. And so then what happens is people will have a hard time seeing the letter. Whereas if, say I did pinks and purples for most things for the monster, that might help because it's all sort of in the same family of color. Doesn't mean you can't use little splashes of contrasting color, but just kind of thinking about maybe being careful of using too much. Sometimes we want to kind of use every color that we have. So so if I was going to do the pinks and purples, maybe keeping them very similar in value, or maybe thinking about okay, I'll do the body pink, but then if I give them some spots, which I probably will later, maybe those could be more of a red violet, something a little bit darker but still very much related to the pink. And of course, red violet's related to purple. Yeah, he does make me chuckle. It's just he's got a very, surprised look or indignant look on his face. It's also the way the arms are kind of in front, almost like he's grabbing, himself and embarrassed that he's being seen. Like you just open the door to the bedroom or open the door on the monster. That's part of the fun too with the monsters, is thinking of the story behind it. What's going on here? I usually don't come up with an elaborate story for my monsters. I just sort of like leaving them, and if somebody wants to come up with a story, that's fine with me. Alright, turning to the thinner, the super fine. Just kind of feel like he needs like a big spot on his belly, and then he needs like a little belly button. I don't know why. I don't really usually do that kind of stuff, but I don't know. He just seemed like he needed it. Okay, so he's looking done, but I'm just kind of looking at the time. I still have a lot of time left. So instead of cutting it short, I'm going to pull out my colored pencils. Alright, now I'm going to add some color to him. And so I was talking about pinks and purples. That's not, why not? Alright. So as I'm doing this, a couple things to kind of keep in mind. I mean, there's a lot of detail on him, and I hadn't really thought about coloring him, as I was doing this. So the problem is like, oh, okay, there's all these like little spots. So you could drive yourself crazy if you wanted to, and you could try to color around each one. But that could be pretty tedious. So what I'm going to do, and I think this will work, is I'm just going to color over them. Now, I'm not pressing super hard with my pencil. Okay, so as I'm shading, I'm trying to use a very even pressure, but I'm not pressing super hard because these pencils are a pretty good quality, and they can actually cover up the black, at least to some degree. So if I press really, really hard, that's going to make the color very dark and very opaque, and so it could easily cover up the black. Now there are times when I want to do that, but since I have the ink down, I don't want to do that. So I'm just trying to keep a nice even pressure and just, coloring them in. And then certain colors are very opaque and some are very transparent. So it really kind of depends on the color. But then what I'll do is all those little spots, I'll come back with a darker color later and color them in. Now, if you want to kind of up your game, you can do some shading. Like I can put a little darker value, around the edges to make it look a little more rounded, or to make it look like it's in shadow. But this paper has a texture. It's a texture that they call a vellum texture. And vellum just comes from the idea of vellum, which is a type of paper. Actually, vellum, I believe, was, if I'm correct, was animal skin. And they used to, basically prepare it, tan it, or whatever they would do, and use that instead of paper. I think that's it. I think that's vellum. And that prepared skin would have a certain texture to it. And so now vellum refers to a kind of see-through paper, a translucent paper, similar to tracing paper, but usually much heavier, thicker. And now you can get paper that has a vellum surface. And what that means is that it's fairly smooth, so the ink worked really great on it. But vellum, that surface is just slightly rough. And that's actually really good for materials like colored pencil or graphite pencil, because that rough surface grabs the graphite and the pigment. And I think I may have been talking about this yesterday whenever I was doing my little guy, or one of the days, talking about the types of drawing paper. So that's what makes this mixed media paper really interesting, is that it's a smooth enough surface where you can paint on it, but then it's also has that little bit of a texture that makes it really good for dry materials like the colored pencil or like graphite pencil. And so with the pencil, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to create some value by pressing a little bit harder. And what that does is that fills in more of the white paper. So all these like little white specks that you see when you color, that's the paper showing through. And that's the texture. That's the little craters. If you ever looked at a piece of paper under a microscope, you would see that it's made up of all these paper fibers that lay in all kind of different directions, and that's what creates the texture. And so as you color, as you draw on top of that texture, the points of that paper that are up higher, they grab the color, or they grab the graphite. In this case, it's the color. So if I wanted to make this a very solid color and fill in all of the white, I would have to press very, very hard. And so this paper is not super great for that because of that vellum surface, that slightly roughened surface. But if I do press really hard, I can fill in all the white spots. Actually, what I do is I flatten the paper. I flatten all those peaks and valleys. That's an easy way of thinking about the vellum, is that the peaks and the valleys. And so when I press really hard, I'm going to flatten that paper. I'm going to fill in the entire surface with the pencil. But I don't want to do that. I mean, that's how you can get very rich, very bright colors. And if you ever see some drawings, especially online and on social media, a lot of people are sharing images of very super realistic, photographically realistic. You know what I'm going to do is belly too. Photographic, realistically made colored pencil drawings. And the way they do that, it's called burnishing. So whenever you rub something and you make it kind of real shiny, you're kind of flattening it. That's called burnishing. And so what you do is you press so hard on the paper that you're really burnishing it, and a lot of times the colored pencil gets shiny because of that. But anyway, what they're doing is they're pressing really hard and they're putting lots and lots of different layers of different colors on it. And you'll often see that, they use up a whole lot of colored pencil. I'm not going to do that with this monster, partly because I just don't have the time. And the other reason is I just don't have the patience. So I'm just going to quickly add some color to him. And I think back, I mentioned it earlier about like maybe making colored pages from these pen drawings. Thinking back to how popular coloring books, adult coloring books, were several years ago. I don't know if they're still, I don't think they're as popular. But I'm just taking my time. I'm trying to use a very even pressure just to keep the coloring very even and very smooth. And I have a lot of experience with shading and coloring and all that. So I can do this pretty quickly and make it pretty smooth. So if you're doing it and you're like, mine doesn't look that smooth, it could be the paper that you're using. You might have a rougher kind of paper. And the other thing is just that pressure, that very even pressure. And it's something that when you do it a lot, you get really good at it. So yeah, I'm just trying to find little areas where I can just darken it a little bit. Not a whole lot. I'm not doing a whole lot of shading. But you know, like right underneath the arms, that's a good place to get a little bit darker. The side of the legs, underneath the leg here. Just to get a little darker. Add a little bit of shading. If I wanted to, I could blend in other colors. But I think I'm just going to kind of use one color. Alright, so that's done. I think I'm going to use this darker, this fuchsia color, and that's what I'm going to use for the spots. And so it's just a slightly darker pink, basically. Kind of like a pink or a magenta. And so this is a good technique to use when you have all those little details. And instead of trying to color, just imagine if I was trying to color around each of all these spots. So like if I were thinking like, oh, I'm going to have, you know, dark purple for the skin and then a light pink for the spots, I couldn't do this. It only works with dark on top of light. But what's interesting is because now I'm putting this fuchsia on top of that pink, I am actually filling in more of the space, and I don't see as much of the little tiny white specks because it already has some of that pink down, and now this fuchsia goes on top, and I want this fuchsia to be a little bit darker. So there's less of the little tiny white spots showing. So this is a little tedious to go in and fill in all of these, but it would have been much more tedious to shade around each one of these, to color around each spot. Okay, I think I'll go ahead and put a little bit of this on his belly. Okay. So let's see, I've got this purple, this royal purple. Doesn't look like I have any other purples. I do have this lighter purple here, bright lilac. Let's go ahead and use the darker purple, just around his eyes. I'm just going to try to make it a little bit darker around the edge. Just to give it a little bit of a three-dimensional feel. Okay. Just thought, I think I'm going to do his hair purple too. I think blue eyes. And you can see how that pen just shows through. Alright, and I want to use kind of a yellowish color for the horns. Got this deep cadmium. Let's go ahead and sharpen it. So the yellow is going to bring in a little bit of contrast. And then I need some, I think I'll just go back to this fuchsia, deep fuchsia. He does make me chuckle. That's always a good thing. Yeah, so he's feeling pretty finished. So I'm gonna go ahead and sign him. I was just kind of thinking, like, like I said, I could do an entire name, a word. I could do the entire alphabet if I wanted to. But then I was just thinking, like, it might be really interesting. Like, what if I would have really tried to? Oops, sorry, as I bumped the table. What would it have been like if I had tried to completely camouflage the A and just really use the A as a kind of a starting point, and really just camouflage it. So you could do that. You could use the letters instead of being very overt about, like, okay, there's that A. You could use it just as that inspiration. But anyway, so there's day number 28. Taking letters and turning them into monsters, monsterizing letters. So that's something to kind of think about. And like I said, you could do a name, you could do a word. There's so much that you could do with that. So anyway, I appreciate you joining in. Again, I'm sorry that I couldn't live stream today, but got the video. So you can watch that as much as you want if you need to. So just 3 more days left. So hopefully tomorrow I'll video, and hopefully I'll be able to do at least one last live stream on Friday, and then Saturday's Halloween and the last of the monsters. So I really appreciate you tuning in. And remember, if you've been doing monsters, I would love to see them. I've loved being tagged in things on Instagram and on Facebook of people doing monsters, whether, I know there are some teachers that are doing it with their students, and I know that there are some folks that are doing it with their children and their grandchildren, and then I know some people are just kind of doing it because it's a lot of fun to do. So anyway, I'd love to see that. So make sure that you tag me, or you can post them in the comments on Facebook or wherever. So really appreciate you tuning in and joining me again. So as always, thank you so much, and happy creating.